Okay, so I'm about to open this box. In here is the Typhon V4. I promised ARRMA that I would unbox this for the very first time. I haven't seen photos. I don't know what they've changed, but Jason asked me to unbox this live in front of the camera so that we could see my reaction. I'm expecting something different here because if he's asked me to do this, that means the Typhon is going to look quite different from what it used to look. They've changed a lot of it. I don't know. I really don't know. The box is sealed. It's actually been sitting here for a day because I haven't had time to do this. So yeah, I'm stalling. Let's crack this open because I've been so tempted to peek inside. All right. Okay, still nothing. Oh, I can see the box. I can see the box. Wait. All right. Oh God. Oh. Oh, yes. Oh, they went with the black. Oh, that looks stealthy as. Look at that. And it's got the same sort of wheels as the Italian. So even the tread looks very similar to the Italian. Oh, wait, look at this. Look at this. 70 miles an hour. So, get rid of that. Oh, yeah, boy, that's what we're talking about. Whoa, that color though, that body, those wheels. Yes, please. ARRMA, once again, delivers. So new features, so new wheels, new motor mount. We got rubber seals on these little hub nut things so that they don't back out, because I know some people have backed out. Oh, new wing! I just realised. So okay, new wing as well. Right. Okay. Yes, sir. Let's have a sticky beak at this. Right. Okay, I'm going to go through all this in in the actual video. This is just, oh, it's got like a satin finish. It's not shiny. It's a satin finish. I just realized. Still got the vents on the body. Okay, taking this out. Oh, it's satin. That looks sexy. What? Yeah, okay. Yep, I'll pay that. So it's literally a small version of the Italian wheels, or rather tires and the wheels. Yeah, it's exactly that. All right, so there we are. That was my very first reaction to seeing the Typhon 6S V4, or 2019 edition, I guess you could call it, for the very first time. And what a beautiful car it is. Of course, I do have it here already out of the box because, well, I've kind of spoiled it at the start of the video, as you saw. Now, before we get stuck into everything about the car, I kind of want to point out a couple of things on the box, because obviously this car has had a few improvements from the V3, and at the risk of perhaps forgetting something, I figured we'll go through what's on the box, because there's actually pretty much everything's listed on here, and we can go through this and kind of talk about it a little bit. So with all these new boxes, you're going to see Horizon Hobby kind of stamped on all the corners of the box, which I think is pretty standard through most of their products, regardless of whether it's a Terra product or a Losi product. You'll see this sort of thing on here, as well as the ECX products as well. On the corner here, you've got 70 miles an hour, which is of course 10 miles an hour faster than the previous version, which I'm very pleased with. It does say in a little asterisk here that it's 113 kilometers an hour. I believe it's actually supposed to be 114 kilometers an hour when you round it off, but whatever. Speed achievable in optimum conditions, I should say, on 6S LiPo with optional pinion gear. Of course, they do give you an optional pinion gear in the bag here so that you can, of course, reach that speed. But for general bashing, I think they give you a 13-tooth pinion just so you can run the car without anything getting sort of too hot. Got Spectrum on this corner of the box here. Everything else pretty straightforward. As we flip it over this side, we have the radio, the car, the servo, BLX 185 ESC, and of course the 4074 2050 kV brushless motor. This system, actually this trio here, has been, I think the servo has been the same since the V1s, and these two have been the same since the V2s, and they've been a pretty reliable ESC and motor combo. IC5 connectors, we'll talk about those a little bit later on. Of course, some just kind of in point form, they kind of tell you what this car is all about. So it's ready to run, waterproof, metal gears, 6S capable, brushless, and of course it has a 2-year warranty. But you'll need to read up on that to make sure that it applies to you or in your country. And of course, what is required. On this side, we have just a side picture of the car. And of course, here we just talk about the barcodes, what's included, what's required again. That's pretty much it. Now, when we flip over to this side, things get a little bit more interesting. We start to see a little bit more about the new features of this car. The never loose red aluminium servo saver. I can't say that I've ever had an issue with the servo savers, but of course I have heard and seen people with these problems on Facebook, and they're like, oh, you know, my servo's turning, everything's working, but I'm not getting maximum steering, or I'm getting very little steering, and that was because the servo saver essentially had come loose. So nice to see that ARRMA have actually addressed this, and apparently it's not meant to come loose again. We also have the never pop ball ends. So these essentially have some oversized screws on there so that the ball ends don't actually pop out. IC5 connectors, which again we'll talk about when I have the car in my hands. We have a new motor mount, which means that now with 4 screws on the top here, you can actually remove the diff very easily, and 2 screws allows you to slide the motor in and out so that you can change out your pinion a lot easier. And of course we have the new radio, which is the STX2, and we'll be talking about that very, very soon. As we flip the box over one more time, there's some larger pictures here. Once again, we have the new color scheme on the body. We have aluminium shock caps. So on the V3s, I believe they switched out to plastic shock caps, and I know that some people had an issue with that, and some people actually had them pop off. I personally haven't had that issue. I haven't had the Typhon since the V1, believe it or not. So this is only my second 6S Typhon, but I do have the Senton V3, which also came with plastic shock caps, and those ones haven't popped off on me. But I know that some people did have that issue with some of the Typhons, so nice to see that they've gone back to aluminium here. We have a new rear wing. This is a high-speed, low-downforce wing for and stronger mounts. So they've definitely improved the mounts on this buggy, which is really nice to see. We have hub nut and O-rings. Hub nut O-rings. So these O-rings kind of go on the end of the nut that kind of retains the pivot ball in your steering knuckle, and that is designed to kind of stop it from backing out. I know that some people have had this issue in the past. I personally haven't had it, but I know my mate Brad, who had the Notorious, he had that. He actually lost one. When I did the video of the Creighton and the Notorious over at the Altoni BMX track, at the end of the day, at the end of the run, we noticed that one of his little nuts had actually gone missing. We went back looking for it, spent probably 20 minutes looking for it, couldn't find it. So it was a bit of a shame. But hopefully they've addressed this now, and we shouldn't see too many people lose these little nuts, which will be nice to see. And of course we've got the new wheels and tyres with the D-Boots Qatar tyres, as they're called, but obviously just in a buggy version. They've got the same tyre on the Italian V3, and no doubt the Italian V4 will have the same tyres, but this is just a smaller, sort of shrunk down version for the actual buggy itself. And that is pretty much the whole walkthrough of the box and all of its features. So we are done. No, I'm just kidding. We're done with the box though, so we can get rid of that as per normal. So radio, the car itself, I'll keep that in shot just here. And before we sort of get stuck into the meat of this unboxing, let's talk about what you get in the bag here. As I pour out all of its contents, bar the user manual. We'll talk about that a bit later. So we have some shock pistons. So these are kind of handy to have, I suppose, if something goes wrong with your existing pistons, or if you want to tinker a little bit and kind of tune the car to perform a particular way, you can use these and swap out the pistons in your shocks. They also give you some blank ones in case you want to drill them out yourself and set up your own tune. So cool that they've included that. Speed chart, kilometers on one side, miles on the other. Very cool. Battery sizes, all of that sort of thing. Battery recommendations is in here as well. And of course, this will tell you, for the small standard pinion, you can use pretty much on, off-road, high resistance areas, so really bumpy terrain, grass fields, things like that. And of course, as you go with the high-speed pinion gear, ideally you want to keep that on a flat surface. It's really made for speed. Now the pinion gear that they provide is a 20-tooth pinion gear, and I find this really interesting because the Typhon also had a 20-tooth pinion gear, but that has bigger wheels, and of course that reached 70 miles an hour. So I'm curious to see how this one's going to get 70 miles an hour with the same pinion. I'm assuming that the input gear to the front and rear diffs changes the ratio, the overall ratio of the car. I'm assuming that that could be the case, and that's why you can do the same speed with the same pinion as in the bigger car. Hopefully my theory is correct. So that's the pinion there. They also give you a bind plug. Now this you only really need if you somehow unbind the radio from the stock receiver, or if you want to put another receiver in here to bind to this radio, or if you want to bind another radio to this receiver. Otherwise, you don't really need this, but it's good to hang on to, because if somehow the radio does become unbound from the receiver, you can obviously bind it back up. It should come pre-bound out of the box though, so you shouldn't really need to worry. Just put that in a safe place, put it in your toolbox or something like that, hang it off your key ring, and yeah, just don't worry too much about it. Tools. So ARRMA have always been very good at supplying pretty much all the tools that you need to work on the car. 17mm wrench. You got a small little cross wrench here for the smaller nuts as well. You have Allen keys in here for pretty much every nut, every screw that's on the car. However, I would recommend you getting some good quality hex keys or hex wrenches, just because these can round off a little bit, or they can even strip out your screw heads. So anywhere where you might find you got a little bit of pressure, you need that little bit of extra torque, get some good quality tools just to avoid things from going wrong and stripping out any of the screw heads. We've got the user manual. Now the user manual is pretty thick, but as you can see on the front here, we've got Creighton, Typhon, Typhon, Outcast, and Notorious. There are part numbers and exploded views for pretty much all the cars in here. Of course, there's also multiple languages in here as well, so that's why this is a little bit oversized. But all the information in here, including maintenance information, is very, very useful in here, especially if you're new to the hobby. This is good kind of, office chair reading, if you know what I mean. So yeah, it's great for that. But don't take your phone in there, take this in there and read up on it, and you'll get some pretty good useful info out of it. There's also some warranty information on the back, and that is about all we need to know about that. The radio, the STX-T2. Now this, I have a couple of choice words to talk about, and this is going to be a little bit of a rant, and I'm really sorry Horizon, Spectrum and ARRMA. I'm going to apologize in advance because there's probably some stuff that I'm going to say that you may not be too happy with. But I hope it's constructive criticism. I hope you take it as such. I hope that I am polite enough that you're not going to get upset at me and send out a hit squad. But I do want to point out some of the pros on this radio, such as 4 AA's, which is pretty much industry standard, no collapsible antennas to break off. You have reverse switches, you've got throttle trim, you've got steering trim as per standard. You've got a steering dual rate, which is a really cool thing to have with a lot of more modern sort of ready to run radios as well. And of course you also have throttle dual rate, which is a really big plus, especially if this is something that is fairly new to you, if this is your first kind of high speed vehicle, or if you want to share the car with people that you know are a little bit less experienced than you, you can turn down the top speed of the car by obviously adjusting that with the throttle dual rate knob. You also have a throttle limiting button, which allows you to go to 50%, 75 or 100% of the power. So couple that with the throttle dual rate and you can slow this thing right down. So these are the really good features of this radio, but unfortunately there are some things here that I'm not really a big fan of, and there's one in particular that's a bit of a deal breaker for me. That being said, the handle feels really quite thin in the hand, which is something that I noticed pretty much from day one, and I have never really gotten used to it. It just feels like I don't have a really strong grip on it, whilst with the tactic radios and some of the other radios that I use, the handle's a little bit thicker. It kind of feels my big mitts a little bit better. Obviously for smaller hands this could be totally fine, and again this could be something that you could get used to. The throttle trigger feels a little bit lighter. Now, I know that when I did the ARRMA interview with Jason, he said that, you know, he kind of suggested that there would kind of tension the throttle and the steering a little bit, make some of these minor adjustments. I still feel that they have a long way to go to get this right. The throttle still feels a little bit too light. It's definitely noticeable when you hold this radio and you hold the old Tactic radios, and even radios like my Spectrum DX5C that I also have, the throttle definitely feels quite different. So the tension here needs to be a little bit better, I think, for these particular vehicles. That's just my opinion. But again, you could possibly get used to this. The wheel is almost comically oversized. I've never been a fan of these sort of size wheels, but I have to admit that I also have the DX2E, and I've gotten used to using that radio, and it doesn't feel too bad. Now, granted, the handle on that does feel a little bit nicer, and it's rubberized as well, so probably an unfair comparison overall. The overall experience is a little bit nicer with that radio than it is with this one. But having the bigger wheel may work in your favor, because I suppose with the bigger throw you may have more finer resolution in the steering. You might be able to control the steering a little bit better, I guess, whilst with a smaller wheel that may not be the case. But I would have preferred the wheel to have either a foam or rubberized outer surface, not this sort of like cheapy plasticky feel to it. That's one thing that I really don't like about it. Now for me, the deal breaker with this particular radio is that it does not use the DSMX or DSMR protocol from Spectrum. It uses the FHSS protocol, and that means the radios like my DX5C that I mentioned earlier, I can't bind that radio to this car, so I have to go and get another receiver. Now, the argument could be had that, yeah, well, you had to do that with the Tactic radios anyway. Yes, that's true, but I didn't feel compelled to change out those radios. I can live with those radios. In fact, I have 10 of them, believe it or not, who all hooked up to most of my ARRMA cars, and they all work perfectly fine, and I'm very happy with those radios. I have no desire to change them over. Whilst with this one, before I even use the car, I'm contemplating what I'm going to do about changing it over. So I hope that in future releases that ARRMA, Spectrum, Horizon, whoever's in charge of coupling these radios with these cars, I hope that they make the proper changes. Perhaps the DX2E would be a more viable option to supply with these cars. In fact, I used to have, let me rephrase that. I've got an old Spectrum radio which I don't think is available anymore, and that is the DX2L. That actually came with my Vetera Camorra car, and it is an absolutely brilliant radio. It's got a little foam wheel. It feels a lot nicer in the hand. It's got a little bit of a rubberized kind of bit on the back here, which actually feels quite nice. It has steering endpoints, throttle endpoints, steering dual rates. It's got all of the features that you expect, and it looks like a fairly standard sort of run-of-the-mill radio. Now, of course, these sort of more spec'd up radios, they may incur a higher cost overall to the cars. If that is in fact the case, and you'll start to see people not being too happy with this, if this is what happens, then I would suggest that perhaps ARRMA or Horizon need to start thinking about supplying these cars as a bind and drive with the DSMR receiver, or perhaps even as a plug and play scenario and not supply a radio at all. At least provide the option. So maybe you can get one that's ready to run and one that's not. I don't know. Maybe that could be something that could be looked at in the future. But for me, these radios, I think, are not a good match for these particular cars, at least in the way that they are currently set up. Now, I'm not asking Horizon or Spectrum to kind of make something out of thin air. They have these radios already. They have this protocol, this better protocol already. All they have to do is install it into these cars. So it shouldn't be too difficult. I think the only thing that could hold them back is price. But as I said, there are options to overcome that. That is about all I'm going to say about the radio for now. I think I've gone on long enough, so let's talk about the car. All right, so the car itself. Here it is. In all its glory. I'll give you the old spin around as I normally do, and of course I'll give you some close-ups as we talk about the car. There is the nice beefy wing mount that they've improved on. Here's our tyres, here's our body. Of course the body does not have that nice sort of shiny look to it anymore. It's now a satin finish. The wheels and tyres, kind of a shrunk down version of the Italian V3. But, you know, just one last thing about the radio. this is one of the things that I don't like. You know, they had it so right with the tactics, having an antennaless receiver. And this is the other thing too. Spectrum do have antennaless receivers now as well. And now we've got to deal with this. So the V1s were the only ones that had this antenna sticking out, and now we're back to it with the V4s. So it's kind of come full circle, and I think they need to find a way to eliminate this, because it kind of spoils the look. That being said, this is the only car that has this because it has such a low slung body. All the other cars in the range, I believe, even though the antenna will be sticking up, it will be sticking up underneath the body, so the body will cover that up. So, speaking of the body, let's talk about it for a second. Nice and sturdy. Of course, you got the stickers on the inside as per normal. You know, ARRMA have been doing this for a very long time, so they put the stickers on there just to stop the, you know, wires and batteries and the chassis from rubbing off the paint. I think it's a really cool thing. I wish more manufacturers would do that out of the box as well. I will say though, I don't know if this is just with my car, but a lot of these stickers, almost every sticker that's on this car has got bubbles in it. It hasn't been applied 100%. There are bubbles on the front windscreen, the side windscreen, the side stickers where the Typhon logo is. There are bubbles literally everywhere. I don't think I've remembered seeing those other cars with so many bubbles. So I don't know if this is because of transportation or if something's happened here. Yeah, I think whoever's putting these stickers on kind of needs to lift their game a little bit. There's way too many bubbles on these stickers. So that's a minor thing, it's not a big deal. I mean, the body's going to get wrecked anyway. So there we go, top down view of the chassis. A lot here looks very familiar. There really isn't too much that they've changed that you sort of notice from, you know, just sort of glancing at it. Of course, the one thing that you will notice that's different is the motor mount and the way that you can access the center diff with just 4 screws on top. This top section comes out and out comes your center diff. And of course, the motor mount has 2 locking screws on top, which allow you to slide the motor in and out very easily. Without having to remove the entire center section. So with the previous cars, if I wanted to change out a pinion, I would take out the 5 screws underneath, so 3 for the motor mount and 2 for the actual opposite diff mount, which are mainly plastic. And then you take out the entire center section, disconnect your motor, and then away you go. You can change out the pinion and slide the motor however you like, and make sure the gear mesh is all correct and all that sort of thing. So you don't have to worry about that now. It's a lot quicker, it's a lot easier. And I think it's long overdue, to be honest, because sliding motor mounts are not a new thing. They've been used primarily, I suppose, in race kits, but some of the ready-to-run cars out there, such as my Team Magic cars, are starting to come out with these sliding motor mounts. They just seem to be a much better feature, so good on ARRMA for finally jumping on the bandwagon and doing that. The IC5 connectors. So the idea behind these, yes, they're a different color. Apparently they have these little caps which I believe can pop off. I'm not even going to try and take it off now, but I believe you can pop these caps off just like the XT90s, and you can reuse them. So you can desolder them and reuse them just like your XT90 plugs. These are backwards compatible with the EC5s. So if you've got EC5 connectors already, then you should be able to plug them straight into here without any problems. The difference with these is they've got what looks to be 2 extra pins, or maybe 1 extra pin or something in the middle here between the 2 bullets. And that's going to allow future incarnations of ESCs to talk to batteries. Now, I'm not sure what kind of information they're going to be exchanging there, whether it's individual cell voltages or something along those lines, I'm not sure. I don't have all of that relevant information. I'm not going to speculate in case I mislead people, but that would make things really, really interesting, because obviously these aren't the first people to do kind of, or rather, they're not the first people to eliminate the balance lead on a battery, but I think the fact that the ESCs will be able to perhaps talk to or read the battery a little bit better, that's a step ahead of what is currently available, and I'm really excited about that. I'll be very curious to see how that's going to work. I'm also hoping that I can get 1 or 2 of these batteries and maybe a charger and sort of toy around with it and see what kind of experience that will be for me. Because yeah, that's, I think, a really exciting thing moving forward. The hobby is constantly evolving, and it's really nice to see this. Well, my antenna on the Typhon just fell out. That's a bit of a shame. So I'm going to have to find a way to lock that in place properly. Once again, I wish I had antennaless receivers. Anyway, so I'm going to have to fix that up. We have our steering servo, BLX 185 ESC motor over here. I think we've, you should be pretty familiar with this car overall. We've got front and rear sway bars pre-installed. The chassis braces are all very much the same. But of course, the wing mount is very, very beefy. I think it's probably like 6 millimeters thick now on each arm. So very, very curious to see how that's going to work. And it looks as though the wing itself can raise up and down. So very, very cool. Nice to see ARRMA have improved the wing mount. I'll be curious to see what it's going to be like on some of the other cars as well, if they've improved the thickness of the wing mount on those particular vehicles. Of course, you've got the strengthened bulkheads, which was already, you know, kind of a hand-me-down from the V3s. The tyres feel fantastic. I would still like to see some slightly firmer foams on these ready-to-run vehicles, but the foams themselves don't feel terrible. I think they're kind of okay. The wheels feel fine. Suspension-wise, of course, they're going to get this right. I don't think they've really stuffed up the suspension on any of these ARRMA cars. Well, let me rephrase that. The V1 Creighton that I had a very saggy rear end. So yeah, they have made some improvements to the suspension over time. So I would have been surprised if they stuffed this up. But, you know, ARRMA does an excellent job of setting up their cars, and they've done the exact same thing here. The car doesn't feel too heavy overall, despite the fact that we've got some more extra plastic, you know, and all that sort of thing. It really feels reasonable. I think it's going to do quite well. And of course, being 6S capable, that's a lot of power. Now, one of the things you need to be careful of is, of course, putting the body back on, making sure that you get that antenna tube to come through the body. And hey presto, there we have it. So we have the STX2E radio, which I think, I don't know. I'll be curious to see what some of you say about that radio in the comments. You know, have you used that radio or this radio? How's your experience been with it? Do you like it? Did you find it just took a little bit of time to get used to? Have you had any problems with it? Range issues, anything like that? Durability wise, has the trigger failed, the steering wheel, anything like that? So I'm curious to know, those of you out there who have perhaps used this radio, if you've come across any of these sorts of problems and how you found the experience overall. But that is pretty much where I'm going to leave this unboxing. Please be sure to check out the video description. I'll have links in there to the ARRMA website about the Typhon 2019 edition. There'll be links in there to how to set up your dual rates. I'll even put the links in there to the ARRMA interview that I did with Jason Dearden, which is of course the founder of ARRMA. If you guys are interested to know a little bit more about the brand and even get a little bit of a glimpse of what's coming up later on in the year. And of course, there'll be links in there to my social media pages as well, if you want to go check that out and kind of keep a couple of steps ahead of what goes on here on YouTube. That is it from me. Thank you all very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new, and I'll be speaking to you all next time.